On a freezing New Year's Eve, Daniel pulls over on a deserted highway to save an unconscious elderly woman, infuriating his fiancée and changing the course of his night forever. At a small-town AR, he's met with cold indifference, until one young doctor decides to help, uncovering a shocking truth that no one saw coming. As personal lives unravel and unexpected bonds form, two strangers find themselves thrown together by fate. One night, one choice, and everything changes. Stay with us to find out how the story ends. And don't forget to subscribe. Snow has started to fall again just as Daniel switched on the high beams. The Catskills loom ahead in a gray-blue haze, and the windshield wipers struggle to keep up with the sudden gust of powdery flakes sweeping across Route 17. Vanessa, legs crossed, was scrolling through the local radio stations on the dashboard, lips pressed in that familiar line of dissatisfaction. "We forgot the seafood and fruit," she said with a sigh, her manicured finger pausing mid-click. "Ah, seriously?" Daniel glanced over, keeping one hand steady on the wheel. "It's fine," he said, voice even. "There's a market right before we hit the turnoff. We'll stop there, grab what we need. Still plenty of time." She muttered, barely concealing the edge in her voice. It was supposed to be a perfect trip, an escape, a rented lodge with a roaring fireplace, friends they hadn't seen in months, a plunge pool they wouldn't use but would still take a dozen photos beside. Vanessa had picked out champagne that cost more than their hotel stay, and Daniel had gone along with it, as usual. But now, as they left the last sign of the city behind, the road stretched out ahead like a warning more than a promise. Then he saw her, a shape, crumpled, off the shoulder of the road. Daniel instinctively eased off the gas. "What are you doing?" Vanessa asked, sitting up. "There's someone on the side." He squinted through the snow-glared windshield. "God, I think it's a woman. Don't stop." But he was already pulling over. The car crunched to a halt beside the icy embankment, and he flicked on the hazards. "Daniel," Vanessa's voice sharpened, the pitch rising with annoyance. "We're already behind." "I won't be long," he said, opening the door into a rush of freezing air. The woman was old. Her coat was torn. White curls peeked out from beneath a knit hat soaked through with melting snow. Her eyes were closed, face pale against the dirty snowbank. She was barely breathing. "Hey," Daniel said, crouching beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" "Nothing." With one glance back at the car, he lifted her, light as a bundle of coats, and carried her to the backseat. She moaned faintly, head lolling against his arm. As he climbed back behind the wheel, Vanessa recoiled. "You're kidding me. She's freezing, Van. You brought her into the car? Into our asterisk car?" She leaned as far away from the back seat as possible. "Who even is she?" "I don't know. That's the point. You don't no asterisk. What is she, sick or crazy or Jesus, Daniel? What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking she would have died out there. Look at her." "I am looking, and I'm not staying in this car with her. Drop me at the lot where we left my SUV. I'll drive myself to the lodge." "You're not serious." "I am." Daniel gripped the steering wheel, snow ticking against the glass like static. "You really can't stay with me for 20 minutes while I get help." "I'm not sharing air with that," she snapped, pointing behind her without turning. He let out a long breath. "You want to leave, I won't stop you. But I'm not driving past someone who might die just because it ruins our schedule." "You always do this." Her voice dropped, cold and cutting. "You always put strangers ahead of me." Daniel didn't respond. He pulled back onto the road in silence. 10 minutes later, he pulled into the dimly lit lot where Vanessa's car sat, dusted in snow. "I hope she's worth it," she said, yanking her purse onto her shoulder. "You go play hero. I'll find people who actually want to celebrate tonight." The door slammed, echoing like a gunshot in the quiet lot. Vanessa didn't look back. Daniel sat for a second, hands motionless on the wheel. The old woman coughed faintly behind him. Snow swirled in the headlights like ash. He drove. The ER entrance was barely marked, a flickering red sign above rusted double doors, and Daniel half expected to find the place closed. He pulled up to the curb, shoved the gear into park, and glanced back at the frail woman slumped on the backseat. Her breathing was shallow, her lips tinted blue. He didn't know how long she'd been out there. Didn't know her name, but she was still alive. For now. The automatic doors groaned as he burst through them into a too-warm waiting area that smelled like stale coffee and antiseptic. A pair of nurses were huddled around a table with an open cake box and a pot of gas station brew, laughing over some private joke. Behind them, a woman in a white coat leaned back in her chair, flipping lazily through a gossip magazine. "Excuse me," Daniel said, out of breath. "I need help. There's an elderly woman in my car. She's unconscious, freezing. I think she's in shock. Maybe worse." The woman barely looked up. The nurse with the magazine glanced at him over her glasses and raised a brow. "You her son?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "I found her on Route 17. She was lying in the snow. She needs help right now." "So you picked up a stranger and drove her here," the nurse said, closing the magazine. "You have any idea what she's sick with?" "Could be anything." "I don't care what it is," he snapped, his voice rising. "She's dying. She needs a doctor." "She needs a bed," another nurse chimed in, "which we don't have. We're running on a skeleton crew, and you're not even family. Maybe call EAS like a normal person." "She doesn't have time for that," Daniel shouted. "You want to let a human being die in a parking lot because it's inconvenient?" The woman in the lab coat stood slowly. She had sharp cheekbones, tired eyes, and a tone like a gavel. "Let me get this straight. You found someone in a ditch and decided to be a hero?" "God forbid," Daniel muttered under his breath. "Listen," she said, walking around the counter. Her badge read Dr. C. Monroe. "We've got people in here fighting for their lives with real emergencies. You driving in a frostbitten Jane Doe isn't saving the world. You're wasting our time." He stared at her, his belief and rage battling under his skin. "What kind of doctor are you?" Before she could reply, a second voice cut through the room, cool, firm, and unmistakably authoritative. "Where is she?" Heads turned. A woman stood in the hallway beyond the nurse's station, still in scrubs, her coat slung over her arm. She had her keys in hand, her bag over one shoulder, clearly on her way out. "In my car," Daniel said quickly. "She's barely breathing." "Then why are we still talking?" The woman strode past them all, pulling a phone from her pocket as she walked. "Get the damn gurney out there. Now," Dr. Monroe scoffed. "We don't even know who she is." "I don't care if she's a Martian," the woman snapped. "She's alive, and she's our patient. Unless you want to start handing out death certificates in the snow, get the team moving." For a beat, no one moved. Then, begrudgingly, one of the nurses picked up the phone and paged the orderlies. Daniel turned to the woman. "Thank you." She nodded, eyes already scanning him. "How long was she exposed?" "Couldn't say. I found her about 30 minutes ago, just outside Monticello. She wasn't moving. I think she passed out before I got to her." "You did the right thing bringing her in," she said. At that moment, the orderlies pushed through with the gurney and followed Daniel out into the cold. He opened the back door. The woman was motionless, her skin pale and paper-thin. Carefully, they transferred her to the stretcher. Back inside, the chaos shifted into motion. Nurses called out vitals, someone fetched an IV, and machines beeped urgently. Daniel stood to the side, watching, breath visible in the warm air from the door he'd just come through. Then something shifted. Dr. Monroe, who had previously been all disinterest and ice, walked into the room, saw the woman on the stretcher, and stopped. The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stumbled forward, then grabbed the woman's hand. "Mom?" The entire room stilled. "Mom?" Her voice cracked now, panicked and small. "Oh my God! No, 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 no! Mom, wake up! It's me, Claire." The strong, sarcastic doctor from 10 minutes ago collapsed into something human. Her fingers trembled against her mother's wrist. The nurses moved quickly around her, and the physician who had stood up for Daniel, Mia, her badge read, took control with quiet efficiency. Daniel stood frozen, watching the storm he'd unknowingly carried in unfold before him. He turned to leave. "Wait," Mia called after him. "Don't go just yet. We'll need a full account for the chart and probably more than that." Daniel nodded, not quite sure what he was nodding to. The door opened behind him, wind howling through. Somewhere in the hallway, a nurse murmured, "Damn, he saved her life." But Daniel didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who just stepped into a story he didn't know the ending to. Daniel sat in one of the plastic waiting room chairs, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly they'd gone cold, despite the overheated air around him. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The receptionist's keyboard clicked like rain against glass. Time dragged like a limp leg. Behind the double doors, he could hear muffled voices and the occasional rush of hurried footsteps. He didn't know what they were doing to the old woman, Claire Monroe's mother, apparently, but he hoped to God it wasn't too late. She hadn't moved since they pulled her from his car, and even now her fragile frame haunted him, folded in on itself like snow-crushed branches. A uniformed police officer arrived 15 minutes later. The receptionist pointed toward Daniel, and the officer, a broad man with a clipboard and calm eyes, walked over. "You're the guy who brought in the woman from the road?" the officer asked. Daniel stood up. "Yeah, she was passed out in a snowbank just off Route 17. You mind stepping into the consultation room with me for a minute?" He motioned toward a small side door. "Just want to get your statement. Standard procedure." Daniel followed him in, sat down again, and told the same story he'd now repeated 3 times. He and his fiancée had been on the way to a New Year's getaway. He'd seen the woman lying in the snow. She looked like she was freezing to death. He couldn't just leave her. The officer nodded, scribbled a few notes, and asked gently, "You touch her? Besides carrying her into the car?" "No, I didn't go through her things. Didn't move her around. I just didn't want her to die out there." "You got any ID on her?" "None that I saw." The officer closed his notepad and gave Daniel a look that was surprisingly kind. "That was a decent thing you did." Daniel nodded, then gave a hollow smile. "Doesn't feel like it." The officer paused at the door. "Well, it probably saved her life. Just hang tight. We may need to confirm some things when she comes to." "When she comes to." Daniel exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. He went back to the waiting area. Mia, the younger doctor who'd taken charge earlier, was standing near the nurse's station, arguing softly with another nurse about lab work. Her shoulders were tense, hair now tied back into a messy bun, her scrubs dotted with water from the melted snow. She caught sight of him and walked over, her expression tired but open. "She's stable," Mia said, voice low and even. "We got her core temperature back up. Blood pressure's holding. She's not out of the woods yet, but she's responding." Daniel sagged into the chair behind him. "That's good. That's great. She hasn't said much. She's disoriented, which makes sense. Could be the cold. Could be something else." He nodded slowly, unsure whether he was supposed to feel relief or dread. Mia hesitated. "There's something else. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know. Claire, the attending who gave you a hard time, the woman you brought in, she's her mother." Daniel blinked. She didn't recognize her at first. It was only when she got a close look. "There's a whole history there I don't know, but Claire's rattled. Really rattled." "She thought I was wasting her time," Daniel muttered. "She didn't know it was her mom. She didn't care if it was someone's mom," he said, sharper than he meant to. Mia studied him for a moment. "People become different in hospitals. The ones who work here, I mean, they learn to compartmentalize. Some lose too much along the way." He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything at all. Before she turned away, Mia paused. "There's something I think you should hear for yourself. She's awake." Daniel followed her down the hall, past closed doors and darkened exam rooms, until they reached a curtained-off space at the end. Claire was already inside, sitting on a stool beside the bed, pale and unsteady. The older woman, her mother, was propped up slightly, blinking slowly under warm blankets. "Mama," Claire whispered, reaching for her hand. "You scared the hell out of me." The woman smiled faintly. "Didn't mean to. What were you doing out there?" Claire's voice trembled. "I left you in the kitchen. You were having tea. I wanted some air, just a little walk. To the park." "You walked to the park." "Mama, that's 2 miles away." I got turned around. Her voice was a thread. "Then I took a bus, I think. I'm not sure. I got off and couldn't find the house again." Claire closed her eyes. "You know you're not supposed to go out alone. I didn't want to bother you. You were working. I would have come home." The woman reached up and patted her daughter's hand. "It's not your fault." Claire shook her head. Her voice cracked again. "I could have lost you." Daniel stood in the doorway, watching the moment unfold. The sharp-tongued, cold-eyed doctor he'd met earlier had vanished, replaced by a daughter gripping her mother's hand like it was the only thing tethering her to earth. After a long silence, Claire looked up at Daniel. "You found her?" He nodded. She was barely breathing. Claire's face softened, shame flickering across it like a crack in glass. "Thank you, I mean that." "She's tough," Daniel said quietly. "She hung in there." Claire gave a weak smile. "She always does." Mia stepped closer and gestured toward the hallway. "Let's give them a minute." As they walked away, Daniel glanced at Mia. "Do people just forget where home is? Like that?" She nodded. "Sometimes. Early signs. Dementia, Alzheimer's, cold can mess with your brain too. Disorientation, memory gaps. It's hard to tell what came first." They reached the main corridor. The snowfall outside had thickened, streetlights glowing through the curtain of white. Daniel checked his phone. One unread message. "Vanessa, don't bother coming. I found better company. Happy New Year." He stared at it for a moment, then locked the screen. Mia noticed. Bad news. Daniel pocketed the phone. "Just confirmation." "Of what?" He looked at her. "That I was headed in the wrong direction all along." The snow had thickened into a slow, steady curtain of white by the time Daniel stepped outside. The hospital's automatic doors slid open behind him with a hiss, then closed with a finality that felt like something shutting in his chest. He stuffed his hands into his coat pockets, breath-forming ghosts in the frigid air. He didn't have a destination anymore. The night that was supposed to be champagne and string lights, toasts, and inside jokes around a fire pit had been peeled away layer by layer. Now he stood beneath a flickering street lamp in a small-town parking lot. No music, no countdown, just a hollow sort of silence that rang louder than anything. He took out his phone again, not to text Vanessa. He already knew there was no point, but to scroll. Maybe book a room nearby, maybe call a friend. He didn't know, but then a voice to his left caught his ear. "I told you I couldn't leave earlier, and you knew that when we got together. You knew what I'd do." It was her, Mia, the ER doctor who pulled the hospital back into motion when no one else would. She stood just outside the side entrance, phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and tight with frustration. Daniel stepped back into the shadow of the wall, not wanting to intrude, but unable to walk away. "You went without me anyway," she said. A pause. "No, don't turn this around. I didn't choose work over you. I chose to save a woman's life. That's not the same thing, and you know it." Another pause. Her breath came fast now. "You know what? I'll find my own way home." She ended the call, held the phone for a second like it might answer her if she stared hard enough, then slid it back into her bag. She wiped at her face quickly and looked up, and saw him. Daniel started to apologize, but she beat him to it. "You heard all that?" "Only parts," he said gently. "Didn't mean to eavesdrop." "It's fine," she said with a tired shrug. "I guess we're both stranded now." Daniel raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. He went off to ring in the new year without you? Mia let out a breathy laugh, but there was no humor in it. Went to the same party I was supposed to go to. Figured my absence meant I didn't care. I mean, what's a 10-hour shift in a trauma center, right? Daniel nodded. My fiancée left me because I picked up a stranger on the side of the road. She looked at him, stunned for a beat, then laughed again, this time with something genuine in it. Wow, rough night. You could say that. They stood there for a moment, just breathing together in the cold, their pain and disillusionment suspended between them like frost in the air. Where do you live? Daniel asked, surprising himself. She tilted her head slightly. Why? Because I'm offering to drive you home. You don't have to do that. I know, he said simply, but I'd rather drive you home than go to a motel and pretend I'm not already regretting everything about tonight. Mia hesitated for a long second, then smiled. In that case, I'd really appreciate the ride. They got into the car. The back seat was still damp from the blankets they left behind, but Mia didn't mention it. She pulled her seatbelt on in silence, and they pulled away from the hospital, heading down snow-slicked roads lit by the occasional glowing reindeer decorations still clinging to someone's lawn. Mia finally spoke. 3 years, she said, staring out the window. That's how long we were together. We almost got married. But every time I had a night shift or got called in for an emergency, it chipped away at something. Daniel glanced over. He didn't understand what you do. He understood it. He just didn't respect it. She turned toward him. He said I always had a reason not to show up for him. I said I couldn't be everything to everyone. I chose to save lives. He chose to party. Daniel was quiet for a beat. Sounds familiar. She looked at him, eyes curious. My fiancée told me I cared more about a stranger than about her. Said she didn't want to breathe the same air as the old woman I found. Then she got out and left. Mia winced. I'm sorry. I'm not, Daniel said. Not really. He glanced over and found her watching him. She was right about one thing, he continued. I do care. Maybe too much. Maybe in ways that don't make sense. But I'm not sorry for stopping. Not when it saved someone's mother. Silence settled again, not heavy this time, but comfortable, warm. They pulled into town as the old church bell rang 12 slow chimes. Midnight, Daniel parked near the square, where a handful of locals were still milling about, clapping and shouting Happy New Year. Under dim streetlights, someone popped a bottle of cheap champagne and whooped. Mia laughed under her breath. We made it. He smiled. We did. They stepped out of the car, bundled against the cold, and joined the small gathering. No countdown, no streamers, just snow, laughter, and a fire pit someone had dragged out near the sidewalk. Daniel handed her a hot chocolate from a street vendor with a cart that smelled like cinnamon and nutmeg. She took it with both hands and looked at him over the steam. New Year's resolution, she asked. He thought for a second. Stop trying to make the wrong people understand me. She smiled, wide and real. That's a good one. You? Sane, she said, then added, also maybe, dance more. He looked around at the quiet square, at a teenager playing music from a Bluetooth speaker, and reached out a hand. Want to start now? Mia blinked, surprised, then laughed. Here? Why not? They danced, badly, awkwardly, and entirely unselfconsciously, in the middle of the snowy square, while the town rang in the new year around them. Two strangers bound not by destiny or fireworks, but by shared heartbreak, quiet courage, and a strange, beautiful night that neither of them had expected. When they finally stopped spinning, breathless and grinning, Mia looked at Daniel and said, I don't know what this is, but it feels like something. He nodded, his heart warm for the first time all night. Yeah, he said, me too. The morning crept in slowly, light filtering through the quiet streets of Monticello with a soft golden wash. Snow still clung to the roofs and tree branches, undisturbed, the kind of stillness that made you believe, for just a moment, that the world had paused, the storm had passed. Daniel and Mia sat in his car again, hands wrapped around paper cups of fresh coffee from a sleepy diner that had opened early for New Year's morning. They hadn't slept. Neither of them felt like they needed to. They'd walked for hours after the dancing, talked about everything and nothing, music they hated, how their parents met, which side of the bed they each preferred, and what they secretly wanted from life. There had been laughter, tears too, but the kind that didn't leave you feeling empty afterward, the kind that cleaned something out of you. Daniel hadn't thought much about time until the sun started to rise. He turned to her now, studying her in the light. Mia's hair was windblown and slightly tangled, her makeup long since vanished, and yet there was a radiance to her he hadn't noticed before, or maybe had only just come to the surface. "Do you think they're awake yet?" she asked, sipping her coffee. Daniel smiled. "Vanessa? Probably still drunk, or halfway through a mimosa." Mia smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. Pavel's probably posting selfies by the fire, captioning them something like "surround yourself with people who matter." He glanced sideways. "Do you still want to be with him?" She shook her head. "Not anymore. I think I wanted who I thought he could become." Daniel leaned back in his seat. "I thought Vanessa and I had a plan, a future. But looking back, all we had was momentum. We never really stopped to ask if we were still moving in the same direction." Mia turned her head slowly. "And what direction are you moving in now?" He chuckled softly. "That's the thing. For the first time in a long time, I don't know, but I'm not afraid of not knowing." She looked at him with a smile that felt like it belonged to another life, a better one. "I have no idea what I'm doing either," she said. "And for once, I'm okay with that." He watched her for a moment longer, then started the car. "Let's get you home." The drive was quiet but not awkward. They shared a playlist, passing the phone back and forth, choosing songs that matched the softness of the morning. Somewhere along the way, they pulled over on a scenic overlook, watching the last of the night melt away over the hills. When they reached her apartment complex, she hesitated before unbuckling her seatbelt. "I know this was one night," she said, voice careful. "I know it doesn't have to mean anything." Daniel nodded slowly. "It doesn't." A beat passed. "But what if it does?" he added. Mia looked down, then back at him, her eyes searching his. "What if it means something simple?" she said. "Like, this is the beginning of the right kind of story." He reached out, gently brushing the snowflake from her shoulder. "Then let's not rush the ending." She laughed, and it was that same light sound from the town square, the one that told him she was still open to joy, despite everything. She leaned in and kissed his cheek, just barely. "I'll call you," she said. "You better." She got out, walking toward the front steps, and turned back once with a soft wave. Daniel watched until she disappeared inside. He sat there for a moment longer, heart strangely full. Then he put the car into gear and drove home. There was no lodge, no fireplace, no party. But for the first time in years, he wasn't haunted by what he missed, only grateful for what he found. That spring, they met again in the same town, halfway between their lives. Lunch turned into dinner, dinner into weekends. The kind of slow, thoughtful love that unfolds when you're not trying to prove anything, just trying to be seen. By the end of the year, they returned to Monticello for New Year's Eve again. This time together. The fire pit was still there, so was the food cart, and at midnight, beneath the snow and the same soft chime of bells, they held hands as the countdown echoed around them. No big declarations, no Instagram posts. Just two people, a little bruised, a little wiser, finally in the right place at the right time. Mia looked up at him, eyes bright. "Funny," she said, "if you hadn't stopped on that road." He smiled. "I never would have found home." And as the snow began to fall once more, Daniel kissed her, slowly, gently, like a man who had learned the value of choosing with his heart. And this time, he chose right.